This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hello and welcome to Humans of Gaming. I'm your host, Drew Dixon. I'm the Chief Content Nerd at Love Thy Nerd, and I'm joined with Chris Gwaltney. Hey, Chris.
Yo, what's up? I'm Chris, and I am the Chief Executive Nerd with Love Thy Nerd. And this is Humans of Gaming, where we like to have designers and developers, people that make the games we love. We invite them on here and ask them really, really personal questions and get to know them a little bit, you know, because a lot of times the only questions these folks are asked are about the thing they made, not about who they are as people. So we try to get to know them a little bit better.
Yeah. So let's start this out by asking our guest about the thing that he made.
Yeah.
Things. No, our special guest is Henry Audubon. Hey, Henry, how are you?
I'm doing well. You guys have such great titles. I feel like I need to construct a title for myself.
We can give you one. Chief Audubon Nerd.
Perfect. I don't know
okay?
about perfect. It'll serve for now.
Well,
So
you made me do it
Thank
on
you.
the spot. That's as best as I can do.
Thank you.
yeah. So what is Audubon? What is that name? Is that German? I just think of the German Audubon. I don't know the etymology of that name.
It's my middle name, and I'm named after my great grandfather.
Okay.
So my full name is Henry Audubon Butler II. But I just I just truncate it to Henry Audubon just for my kind of public facing name.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different etymological origin than the Autobahn road in Germany. And
Yeah.
my great grandfather was.
I've always thought that was spelled the way you spell your last name, the famous German highway, but I know very little about it apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So my name basically comes from the artist John James Audubon, who drew all the birds who were actually dead, kind of taxidermy statues.
Oh, wow.
You know? It's a little bit.
What an honor.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving actually for me to look at his artwork, knowing the kind of gruesome truth behind it.
Ugh.
But anyways, my great grandfather's parents were big fans of that artist, so they gave him that middle name, and now I've got it.
Okay, interesting.
And-
So, did you were your parents like into birds or something? Or- no, they just
No, but I have a lot of
Interesting.
artists in my family. I mean, especially my grandparents and my that generation. A lot of painters and whatnot. So
okay.
there's an interest in art, but not
Yeah.
particularly in ornithology.
I gotcha. So I have more questions about that, but I feel like we should frame who you are for our listeners first. So you've made some board games, Space Park, and then most recently you're very, very soon you'll be releasing Parks. So yeah, how do you, when people ask you what you do in the board games, in the games industry, how do you answer that?
Well, I'm a game designer, so that means that I'm primarily interested in gameplay and rules and trying to create interesting systems for people to enjoy. My target audience is human beings, but I can imagine games being made for other entities as well.
Okay.
Dogs or AI supercomputers, but I target human beings. And
Thank you.
We have someone who works on our team that makes games for animals, so.
that is fascinating.
Yeah.
I'd love to pivot into that space at some point if the whole games for human thing doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Maybe
you should.
dogs are an easier audience. Maybe, who knows?
Or aliens. I'd like to,
Yeah.
if we encounter extraterrestrials, I'd love to make games that we could play with them. Because games can bring people together, so this might be our only chance at intergalactic peace.
They kind of did that in the Arrival movie, right? They kind of made a way. Did you guys watch Arrival?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, she kind of understands their language. And
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a game. Oh, I'm trying to remember the movie exactly, but there's some interaction there. Like it's a barely a game.
Well, yeah, it's true. I
close.
mean, they can't communicate at all at first. And then I think maybe if they had set a board game down in between them, maybe they would have gotten started a little faster.
Done it.
Yeah, maybe so. Cool. So you're a board game designer, and was Space Park was your first game?
It's my first published game.
First published game. Okay.
Yeah, but behind it in its wake is a whole trail of destruction. Broken games just overflowing from my closet. I think that's pretty common.
I think that's not an uncommon story among designers.
But actually, before I got really into board games, I was making like little video games. Really enjoy like doing game jams and just throwing together simple, small scale video game projects.
Yeah,
and I haven't been doing that as much in recent years, just because the kind of board game thing has taken off a little bit more. But so I don't regard myself just purely as a board game designer. I'm really interested in just games in general, regardless of what kind of medium they're instantiated in.
What kind of video games were you into making or are into making?
Like I said, I love doing game jams where there will be some sort of a constraint or a theme or something that is suggested at the start of the jam, which might last for 48 hours or for a whole week or whatever, and then you kind of make a game that tailors to that theme or whatever the suggestion is. So I would be interested in making any kind of video game, from kind of platformers to shooters to strategy games to little micro card games, or anything, or new stuff too. I mean, I like to be experimental, and but I'm kind of constrained in certain ways by my programming skills, which I'm very, very much an amateur programmer and an amateur artist as well. So just keep the scale of the project in check and just do what I can actually manage. So anyways.
Yeah. How did you get into making games? Like, where did that interest blossom for you?
I have always been interested in games. Like, some of my strongest early childhood memories are playing games and thinking about games and just daydreaming about them. And I guess, though, my real start into game design, I would say, was playing tabletop RPGs and kind of being the game master for my local group, like my neighborhood friends. And we started really young, and at that time I wasn't even aware that there was such a thing as like pre-written adventures and modules and stuff that people would run. So to me, I just thought it was always about just creating your own stories that might have their own kind of systems that would need to be invented or designed. So that was, I think, where I kind of got my start, in a way, was while I was supposed to be doing other things in school, I was just like sketching out dungeons and coming up with weird riddles for my friends to think about. So
that's great.
But then it wasn't until I think college, which for me was a little over 10 years ago, that I really got my that I really started trying to make proper strategy board games. I hadn't really attempted that before. So
yeah. That's cool. And so D&D, was that what you were doing? D&D, or just all kinds of like tabletop role-playing stuff?
We did some D&D. We played a ton of Star Wars, like the West End games, D6 version of Star Wars. We did a lot of that. Played other games. I mean, we dabbled in like Feng Shui, which was a kind of an 80s martial arts movie game that was really fun. And then we also, I made some of my own role-playing games that were probably pretty simplistic, like looking back on them. But, sometimes we would want to play in the universe of a movie that we had just seen or something. And I would, just try to invent something where we could all have a sleepover and play something.
Yeah.
So
I remember doing that. I mean, it was still within like the D&D system, but made a campaign based off this book series I was reading that I was super into and none of my friends cared about, but I basically just forced them to do it anyway. That was a good time.
Well, we've all been there. I mean, trying to get your friends to be interested in what you're interested in, especially when you're the game master, like in the context of tabletop role playing, or for modern board gaming. I mean, if you're the game owner who's hosting, the game night and trying to introduce your friends to games. I mean, I think we've all been there, of trying to switch your friends on to something that you like and all the resistance that you sometimes encounter there. So feel your pain.
That's when I just stopped being friends with those people.
That's one way.
That's funny. So did you, like, have you tried to publish any video games, or how's that process been? I know you said you've participated in some game jams and stuff. Like, yeah. Give us your history of like, how did you get from having nothing published, doing nothing, to like now you have Parks, which is like a board game people are really, really excited about.
I mean, I was just doing the game jams just for fun, really. I was curious about the process of making video games. I kind of got into it through this piece of software called Game Maker Studio, which I would recommend to anybody who just wants to, make a simple video game. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I was just doing that for fun. I had really no aspirations to make video games professionally, unless, of course, I could find programmers and artists and whatnot that would want to help me realize my designs.
Yeah.
Because it was always very limited in scope and whatnot. So, but then I did try to make some larger video game projects, but I would sink about like 6 months into something and then learn some really hard truths about programming and all the mistakes that I'd made on a very fundamental level early on. Sure. Would just have to scrap so much work. So,
but a lot of this was from like a perspective of, hey, this sounds fun, I'm going to do this, but not from I got to figure out how to make a living doing this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. With the video game stuff, definitely. But once I started pitching board games and stuff, I did have aspirations to get published and to try to make it work as a career, which, I heard there were a lot of naysayers early on telling me that's not really possible and, don't quit your day job kind of advice.
Did that annoy you, or did you like, well, these people are just trying to, I don't know, just telling me the truth as they see it or whatever?
I don't know if it annoyed me. I just don't listen very well. maybe in general, sure. But specifically to that kind of advice. Just like, because who knows,
Right, sure.
Some people make it work. And so that was a goal.
Yeah.
Early on. But so, I was pitching out a game that was originally called Pirate Land. That was about like a pirate themed amusement park where there was a kind of a circular island that you would build each time you played. And there were 3 pirate ships sailing around the island. And it was a game targeted kind of a family audience.
Okay.
And I was pitching that game around, and actually, just by a stroke of luck, my older brother, who lives in Athens, which is the same town that Keymaster Games is based out of, Athens, Georgia.
Yeah.
My older brother attended one of Keymaster's game nights where they all play each other's prototypes and show what's going on. And anyways, he just mentioned Pirate Land to them. And then shortly after that, Maddox Schuler, the creative director for Keymaster Games, kind of reached out to me and said they were interested in what I was doing with Pirate Land, and they signed the game. And then it was through the development process that we realized, we want to move away from pirates, and what else can we do? And we changed some things about the game, but it ended up becoming Space Park, which was my first published game, which came out Gen Con 2018, which I think where I first met you, Drew.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you ditched the idea of pirates for space. Are you okay
it's a little bit of a departure.
Well, we were exploring all kinds of different options. At first it was just, they made it clear that they didn't want to go forward with pirates. And I think rightfully so. Pirates were pretty saturated at the time and as a theme in the board game market. And I think they wanted something a little different. And I love like retro futurism, and that style that invokes the golden era of sci-fi. I love thinking about like how people from the past viewed the future and what they got wrong and what they got right. It really is a fascinating like way to just get into their heads a bit.
Yeah.
So I kind of pitched that idea to them of like, hey, could we do something with kind of retro rockets and a kind of retro aesthetic to it? But and they went for that, and we then collaborated on realizing the theme, and we brought on a fantastic artist named Brian Miller, who then just injected the whole project with a huge dose of his own creativity, and that's kind of where it all landed.
Yeah. Cool. So let's can we talk about Parks? So this is the new project and Drew and I got to play this at Origins with a different Matt from Keymaster. And
well, you were
dude,
talking about Maddox earlier.
Oh, Maddox. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And holy crap, like the game is beautiful and super unique mechanics into it too that I was really about. But I don't know, tell us about Parks.
Thank you. Glad you guys enjoyed your session at Origins. So working on Space Park with Keymaster, one of the things that's fun about working with that publisher is that they are very nurturing, especially to me as a new designer. They were very much about like meeting with me on a weekly basis and like just keeping me involved in the development process of Space Park. And so as a result, Maddox and I, we were meeting every week and we kind of had a certain creative rapport going. And it just so happened that during that time of Space Park's development, the folks at 59 Parks, which is a print and illustration company that does just amazing artwork for the national parks, they reached out to Keymaster Games and just said, hey, we love your stuff, specifically Campy Creatures. I think they were big fans of. And so I think the idea just came about of like, hey, if you ever want to make a board game using our art, we'd love to collaborate with you and try to make it happen. And then, Maddox just offered me the opportunity to take a crack at designing the game. And I just jumped at the opportunity, and it was a long process, and I had never done any work like that before, where normally my games are like I am originating the idea in some way and then just building out on something that I already kind of understand. Whereas with this, it was a different starting point. So it was a long process for me to really wrap my head around what the game needed to be or what the game wanted to be. So at first I was trying to design a pure card game. That was the kind of constraint that they originally wanted the game to be designed under. So just, like a fit in the tuck box.
It's a little different now.
It is. So I had a bunch of these different card game versions. And for anyone who's interested in this, if you go on the Parks Board Game Geek page, you'll see a designer diary post for me that outlines a bunch of these different versions. If you're interested in all the early failed Parks prototypes. But at a certain point, Keymaster and 59 Parks decided, okay, what we're going to do is do a standard playing card deck that involves some of the great art from 59 Parks. And so what we want from this Parks board game is actually something that's a more robust, fleshed out strategy game. And it no longer needs to be just a pure card game. Mm-hmm. So when they told me that, I started expanding it. And
the floodgates were opened.
And there were a lot of ideas. Frankly, along the way with all these card games that I had attempted, there were a lot of ideas that needed to be shelved or put in the bin just because they were impossible to pull off in a pure card game environment. But I keep a lot of notes throughout my design process, and so that all the documentation actually was really useful to me because I'm kind of able to go back in time and pull out some of the ideas that were previously discarded and think about them in this new context of like a full on board game. So but really once I was on this path of making the board game, one of the things that was important to me was just understanding what other types of national park games were out there. And so I took a while to just do some research, and one of the patterns that I was seeing in some of these games was having the game played out in some ways like traveling between parks, often over an overworld map, where you're kind of moving from one point to another. And it seemed like a lot of the game was spent between the parks, traveling between them.
Right.
So that was something that I really wanted to avoid in parks, where I wanted it to be more immersive, more immediate, something like you're in the park for the game. And it was at that point that I started to realize that the game needed to be about hiking. And hiking, that was it's an obvious thing in retrospect to think, oh yeah, this game about national parks should be about hiking. But honestly, once that idea came around, it just was the key to unlocking the rest of the whole thing, because there are so many concepts that hiking suggests immediately. Everything from taking photos to camping to, drinking water out of a canteen or whatever. And most especially probably this concept of the trail, which is really the fundamental structure of this game.
Yeah.
And with the trail, immediately you've got this kind of idea of linearity and if you want it to be different every time, you might have like a modular kind of line or a line created out of tiles that could be shuffled up and created each time. And maybe you want people to experience different lines of tiles with each session of play. And so, okay, when would be a good time to rearrange all the tiles? Well, maybe we could do something with the seasons and have 4 different seasons. And so anyways, the point being that all of these, once I got on the trail, so to speak, of hiking, it's things started moving fast, and arrived at the kind of the game that you guys got to experience at Origins. So.
Yeah, that's cool. So did you do you have interest in hiking? Was this or in the national parks? Did this connect with you on any kind of personal level? I'm curious.
I have some experience in national parks, but not any kind of extensive experience. For example, in Ohio, which is where I went to college and actually where I was born, I spent a little bit of time in Cuyahoga Valley National Park.
Yeah.
And so I have some experiences in the parks, and I love to walk. I would say, honestly, for me, more so than specifically the national parks, where this game connects with me is that I love to walk. If I'm in the woods or wherever, I'm very much just like an infinite walker where I'll just go and go. So that's just an activity that I enjoy a lot. So that's where the game really resonates with me personally, is just this kind of pace of walking and exploring. But just casual. I appreciate the national parks. I think they're great, but it's not like I've went on a family road trip as a kid where we visited every park or something like that.
One day.
So I gotta say, my experience with the game, like I said, it's absolutely beautiful. I really pay attention to just even little design things in games. And like just some of the things of like the way the tiles fit together and the simplicity of the design elements, which I'm assuming like Maddox did a lot of that stuff. But even the art on the cards, like all the national parks art, is just out of this world beautiful. That unique mechanic which you kind of talked about with the linear, like almost worker placement kind of thing, is unique to me, because normally in like a worker placement game where you've got your meeples and you put them on a space to take an action, like it's not a linear thing. But in parks it is, and if you go too far forward, you can't go back and take actions that you've passed, really. And then
and if you take your time too much too, like if you stay back too far, you're not going to get the thing that you really need to, which is a nice like balance there as well.
Dude, and the components are like out of this world. It's just
it's
I'm
really
all in.
Nice.
You got me.
That's one of the great things about working with Keymaster. I have to say is that really I can just trust them to create such a great product and a great just visually presented game. We'll have a lot of clarity from the design and just create a beautiful object, So that's just where I just trust them to do the great work that they are known for. And Maddox does a lot of brilliant work in graphic design, but Kyle Key, who is the founder of Keymaster, just has a lot of great insights himself. And they really come together to make fantastic stuff. So anyways, I'm glad that you guys dig it so much. I really appreciate how it all came together. And part of it is due to especially the component quality and whatnot. Some of that is due to the Kickstarter campaign and the stretch goals that we were able to reach and all that, where we were able to really create a lavish game.
Yeah. I think like for me, I do like personally identify with the theme in a really like resonant way, I guess, because I grew up hiking a lot with my dad. It's like kind of one of my best memories with him growing up, and with my brother. We'd go hiking a lot. Like we we did a 3-night, 4-day, backpacking trip through the Grand Tetons once, and just different things like that. We hiked the Grand Canyon, or part of the Grand Canyon once, and so like all the art in this is just so like nostalgic for me in a good way. So I knew like from the minute it was announced, I was like, this is the kind of game that, like, just because the art really is superb from 59 Parks. I mean, all those prints are they're just beautiful. I wish I could buy them all and put them up in my office. But what was really fun, was really nice about the game is like, cause I'm one of those kind of guys actually that the theme of a game, or like even the artwork, I'm never sold on that. You know what I mean? Like, I'll see it in a Kickstarter. Oh, that looks beautiful, but I'm not going to be interested in it until I know if it's like a great game. This Parks was the exception. Like, I supported it without having really gotten to play it at all, or knowing whether it was like fun to play, but then when we played at Origins, it was really impressed with how much fun it was to play, how balanced it was. Like, so, it really is I think a really sharp and well-designed game. It's one of those games that just kind of has, I'm not trying to, I'm not just saying this because you're on our podcast, but it's one of those kind of games that just kind of has everything just kind of works, for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
there's a cohesiveness to it. Like, I always appreciate when, and we've talked about this before on this podcast with other developers and stuff, when like a mechanic also tells the narrative, or like sinks in with the theme. And that's really what you've done with that hiking thing, like with that linear worker placement, because that is also the theme. Like, you're hiking a trail, and that there's just this cohesiveness to the whole game that's like, boom, that's it,
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, I just kept returning to this concept of hiking. And whenever things felt weird, which they often did during the process of developing the game, I was like, wow, something's feeling a bit off. I would just return to that mantra almost and just try to dial in about, well, in what way is this not capturing the feeling of hiking? Like for one example, one thing that I experience walking or hiking is that I'm not always moving at the same pace. If I'm sometimes I'm walking fast and making a lot of progress and hurrying along, especially in the context of a hike. Like, maybe I'm trying to reach the next campsite before nightfall. But other times I'm stopping and appreciating a scene, or I'm taking a photograph, or taking something out of my backpack, taking a drink of water. So there's this rhythm to hiking. And that was one of the things that really came, like, for a little while, the game didn't quite have that rhythm. And then basically having the pair of hikers that you're in control of really allowed for that rhythm to arise naturally, because thinking about what's going on from the perspective of just one of your hikers, it's like sometimes that hiker is moving, but then other times that hiker is hanging out at a spot while the other hiker moves. And so from the perspective of each individual character within the game's world, the rhythm of hiking is kind of achieved. So that's just one example, but yeah, I think it's so important to have a core idea that you can just always return to, especially when it's an idea that offers so much in by way of associated concepts like hiking. It was just such a fruitful concept to land upon. So yeah, I think that helped with the cohesion overall, was just keeping that very simple concept in mind throughout the process.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit. We'd like to hear about you. Where did you grow up? You said Ohio, is that right?
I was born in Ohio, but
Okay.
My parents split up when I was pretty young, and so when I was 5, I moved up to Burlington, Vermont, which is where I went to school, like all through public school, and that was where I was playing D&D and playing tons of video games. And
what else is there to do in Vermont, I guess?
Hike
through the Green Mountains,
Yeah,
it's a beautiful area.
Because I've actually never been to Vermont.
Oh, Vermont is gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's worth making a trip. Yeah, it's incredible.
It is really
Does it
pretty.
look as good as Parks the game? Because that's now my new standard.
I don't know, hard to compare, but
Yeah.
they're both
been-
they're both pretty good.
I've been to Stowe. That's the only place in Vermont I've been.
To ski or
I didn't get to ski. We went in the summer, so
I
we
see.
did some like hiking and stuff. Like we did when I was growing up, we did like a northeast kind of summer vacation where we went to we like flew into Boston, spent a couple days in Boston, then we drove up to Vermont and Maine, and we stayed a few days in Stowe, and we stayed a few days in, I want to say, Bar Harbor, Maine. So anyway, I just remember Vermont being very, very beautiful.
yeah, you're remembering that correctly.
So you liked growing up in that area?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I met a lot of just people who I remain close to this day. I mean, childhood friends who I'm still connected to, and I haven't been back to Vermont in quite a few years now, but I really appreciated my time there, and I think I had a fun childhood, you know, and I think I try to tap into the feelings that I had as a kid and the kind of joy and wonderment that I had playing games and just how excited I would get about games. And sometimes I just try to keep that room open in my mind, you know, as a place I can go to and just check in with myself, you know, when I'm working on things. Would I have gotten excited about this game at 8 years old, at 12 years old, at 16 years old? So yeah, I had a great time there. So, but after I graduated high school, and I'll just mention that I barely graduated high school. I mean, I really struggled in school, partially due to the fact that I was so distracted by games and stuff. I was really, you know, just into Magic the Gathering and into, you know, making my own D&D campaigns.
We would have gotten along just fine, you and I think.
Yeah, cool. I mean, but it was really a source of stress at home sometimes. I mean, I was not doing my homework. I was getting
Between you and your mom, or you and your dad, or both?
Me and my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wanted me to be, you know, passing my classes, which wasn't too much to ask, I think, looking back.
That'd be so unreasonable, Mom.
Yeah. So on just to give you an example, I mean, on the final day of my senior year, I was just going around from teacher to teacher, just trying to turn in stacks of late homework, so they would just take mercy on me and let me pass. So yeah, I ended up, you know, finishing in the 25% of my class that allows there to be a top 75%.
All right.
Way to go, man.
You did it, though.
I did it. I made it.
Yeah.
You hang that diploma on your wall.
You must have gotten some of those teachers to accept that late homework. So
A couple of them.
Yeah.
But then I never thought I was going to go to college. You know, I didn't even take like any of the tests or anything like all my kind of friends were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And but after I graduated, I started working at Ben & Jerry's ice cream shop, which is from Burlington. So
yeah,
it was kind of a fun place to work. And but my parents basically were saying, "Hey, we're not going to help you with rent unless you take some classes at community college." So I started taking classes at the local community college, and
just for that rent money.
For the rent money, I really hated school at this time. It really made no sense to me, this idea of I'm going to optionally go to more school and I'm going to pay, and I'm going to pay for it too. It's like,
totally.
It did not make sense. But I remember the first when I was signing up for classes. First of all, I found that part of it kind of compelling. The fact that I get to choose my classes and whatnot. I was like, okay, this is kind of empowering. This feels less like a child prison to me. I can actually pick what I'm doing. And I remember like learning about philosophy just from the course description list of like intro to philosophy. What is this? You know, and it just all of a sudden there was a discipline that was concerned with the types of questions that me and my friends would always, you know, get into late night arguments about.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, are there colors that we haven't discovered yet that are like out there that what would they look like if we ever saw one? Anyway, so I enrolled in that class, and later in that semester at Thanksgiving, I was up in Montreal visiting my cousin, and my house got broken into, and all of my stuff got stolen. It was a real pivotal moment in my life because I had a lot of just gaming gear. I had my laptop. I had a big DVD collection. I had all this technology, and I was really wrapped up in all that. and it was just cleaned out. I mean, I came back and my back door was crowbarred open, and I had just
brutal.
nothing. I had nothing except for just a stack of books, including like my philosophy books. And so I just kind of turned my attention toward that and just got more into academics and more into just learning about the world a bit. And then, so yeah, I mean, I really took a break from video games for quite a while. And at that time, it just happened to be the case that my stepmom was an advisor at Kent State University in Ohio.
Yeah.
And kind of the offer came up for me to try to apply to Kent and get free tuition there. And I kind of took that chance, and that ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, leaving Vermont and going to college out in Ohio. And there I just really fell in love with school. Honestly,
That's cool.
That's wild.
I ended up majoring in doing philosophy and doing math as my majors. And
jeez. Just a couple easy things.
Well, I really wanted to be like a logician or somebody who was working kind of at the intersection of philosophy and math, dealing with like foundational issues in math and exploring some of the philosophical topics there, like, what are the nature of mathematical objects, like numbers, and in what sense do they exist? How do we know about them? Things like that.
Yeah.
So I was really on that path for a while, and I ended up starting up in a graduate program for math. But then at a certain point in there, I dropped out after seeing how passionate my fellow graduate students in the program were about math. I was just feeling like they were a level or two above me in terms of passion and devotion. So I, at that point, dropped out of the program and decided I was really going to commit myself to game design and to making games, which is just what I was most passionate about. So that really started me on the path that I'm still traveling down now.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's a cool story.
So it sounds like you kind of like, you had to get excited or interested in academics on your own terms. Like you had to find something that you were interested in exploring, regardless of whether or not like there was some sort of payout for you, like I think a lot of people would just go to college because they're like, want that degree that's going to lead to a nice paycheck,
Right. Totally. Yeah.
But it's interesting because when I hear you talk, it doesn't sound like that was ever really like something you worried about.
No, I mean, I was really interested in the subjects themselves. I didn't even attend my own graduation or whatever. I just, the whole degree, like it was unimportant to me, honestly. It was more about the classes and just learning and meeting the professors and just that aspect of it. I never thought about a job or even about the degree very much.
Much to chagrin of your parents, I would guess sometimes. Parents have to worry about those things. But,
I think they were just glad I was going to school. At
a
certain level,
I'm sure.
The standard was set low early on. So,
well, that was all part of your grand plan. Is just set the bar super low, and then
they'll accept anything.
That's right.
Even a philosophy degree.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny when Drew was like, I'm thinking, I don't know how many people go into a philosophy degree wanting to make a bunch of money.
That's true. I don't.
But do people go into board games trying to make a lot of money either?
Exactly.
I mean, I think
right.
I still have a certain disregard for that side of life.
Like a masochist, but I don't know.
I think a lot of people are like really into board games. They're like, oh, I could make money doing this, but they don't. I think the same is true of video. Like, well, there are with video games for sure. There's a lot of people like, oh, you can make a ton of money making video games. But the problem is there's so many people doing it that, you really got to have some pieces fall into place. But board games have a lot of potential nowadays. I mean, it's just even from a financial perspective, I mean, it's just a burgeoning medium right now that people are really excited about. So, still really hard to make like a consistent living in it, but there's at least the possibility there. So I'm curious, did you grow up in a church or anything, or is your family religious at all?
No. Nope. I really did not have any religion in my household as a kid. And Burlington is a very secular town.
Yeah. I've heard that about Vermont in general. Is that true?
I can't really speak to the religiosity of rural Vermont very much. I'm not very sure about that.
But your area felt like there's not churches on every corner like there are here where I live in Nashville.
You know, what there is there's a lot of kind of new age spirituality in Burlington. You know, there's a lot of like crystal shops and tarot readers and that kind of thing. Yeah. And then there's also a lot of churches with just a very kind of broad and inclusive kind of Christian perspective. Like, so there were Unitarian Universalist churches and just things like that didn't seem ever to be very hardline or very committed to specific metaphysical propositions about the nature of the universe or things like. It just seemed like a very kind of welcoming atmosphere at these places. And I went to churches a couple of times growing up. Actually, I'll just say that I had this book called The Beginner's Bible. I read this thing so many times. It was like my favorite book as a kid. Yeah, it was given to me by my aunt, who her whole on my mom's side and her whole side of the family is quite. There's a lot of Christians on my mom's side, and they gave me this Beginner's Bible, and I read it just so much. I remember one of my early memories is going to visit my aunt and them, putting me in Sunday school for a day, just like that, and the teacher just asking us all these questions about the Bible, and me just knowing the answers from the Beginner's Bible that I read backwards and forward.
Was this an actual Bible, or was it like an introduction to the Bible or something?
It was a thick, like, picture book, basically, taking you through the most, I guess, the stories from the Bible, basically.
The big pictures, the big stories.
Exactly, the famous stories. But it was all very mythological to me as a kid and very impressive. I was like, this is incredible creativity and whatnot. That was kind of how I regarded it, as just a really fascinating book of stories. And so I was just intrigued by the whole thing. But I have to say that growing up in Burlington and in my particular household, I didn't necessarily have a concept of how other people regarded the Bible. Yeah.
So you always kind of viewed it as like, oh, this is a really interesting story. And you didn't have a concept that some people are like, no, that's the word of God. And like, it's every letter is truth or whatever. Like, you didn't even realize that existed.
Not so much. It was just a little off my radar.
Sure.
Didn't understand that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because
I feel like most people who grew up in America have the latter kind of perspective, or that's how the Bible is always presented to them, which I think then people have to unpack that in a way, but you never did, I guess. So did you try any of these other religion, like you said, spirituality was kind of the big deal, New Age stuff in Vermont and Burlington where you were? Did you try any other churches or religious organizations?
Well, just by osmosis, really. I mean, I've had my, tarot card readings and my palms read and all kinds of different things, over the years.
Did you ever buy into it, or it was always just kind of like, oh, let's go, this could be interesting?
I wouldn't say that I bought into it necessarily, but I was open-minded, and I would say my mom, who she has returned to, she was raised in the Catholic Church and she went to Catholic school, and later in life now she has returned to Christianity in some capacity. But when I was growing up, she was more of just an open-ended spiritual seeker, I would say. Yeah. And one of my favorite memories as a kid was going to a place called the Dharma Center in the middle of Vermont that was basically a home for Buddhist monks and nuns to live and practice. And we went there one time for a day that was just one of the most special days of my childhood. There's a lot of just silent meditation and walking meditation, and the monks and nuns cooked a meal for us, and we all ate as a big group in total silence together. And anyways, it was just a deep experience.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I was
Interesting.
exposed to some different things, but I wouldn't say that I ever identified as any of these particular ways of looking at the universe. It was just had a very open-ended worldview.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously getting into philosophy and these kinds of things, and I mean, even just what you've shared a little bit, you're clearly like thoughtful about this kind of stuff. I mean, you said your mom was kind of this like open-ended spiritual seeker. Was that, you think that's something that was instilled in you of like just this sort of questioning or curiosity is maybe the word? Is that something you feel like kind of came from her or something else?
It's a good question. I haven't thought about that exact question, the origin of curiosity. Maybe
That'll be the name of your memoir, The Origin of Curiosity.
No, that's a plausible hypothesis that it comes from my mom, although I'm not totally sure. But she's certainly a curious person, and so that wouldn't surprise me if that's where I get it from.
Yeah, sure.
My dad, though, is also a very curious man, and he actually was not particularly religious when I was young, but he is now a deacon in the Episcopal Church.
Oh, wow.
And he's just a very kind of theologically educated person at this point. And actually, when I was doing my philosophy degree, he lived nearby, and we would, have coffee together every Friday, and we would just have these real back and forth discussions. Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause he was training to be a deacon at that point, so he was always reading new stuff, and I was in the middle of my philosophy degree. So, anyways, we were just ready to talk to each other about, the metaphysical nature of the universe, whatnot. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
That's cool. So did you ever land on any kind of like religious perspective, or have you would you call yourself a Christian, or would you call yourself religious in any way now? Like where have you landed?
No, I'm not religious, but I maintain a certain open-ended worldview where I kind of live with the knowledge that I don't know the answer to certain questions, and that's a place where I'm comfortable being.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I would love to know what we've discovered in a few hundred years from now, and what all the artificial intelligence and whatnot that's coming online this century, what all the discoveries that are made on the back of that technology. I would love to know because I think there's just some gaping holes in our knowledge at this point. So I'm not a particularly religious person, but I am a kind of still a seeker of peak experiences and my own kind of interpretation of spirituality, whatever that word really means. But I try to have a meaningful life and an ethically informed life, and and I do care about what the truth is about our universe, and what its origin is and what its fundamental nature is. So I'm interested in questions, but
So what informs you then in terms of, like you said, you try to live an ethically informed life? I'd be curious of like, what does that look like for you? Like, how do you educate yourself and inform yourself about how you ought to be living, if that makes sense?
Well, I think I am informed in part by some of the great ethical thinkers throughout the, specifically the Western philosophical tradition, which is what I have most training in. I mean, really starting with Aristotle and the Nicomachean Ethics, which I think is just a incredible ancient treatise that, obviously is flawed, but had offered such deep ethical insights at such an early time that I think I'm still impressed.
That is so wild. Like, you think about how long ago that was and how, I mean, at least for me, it feels so detached and like, I can't even really imagine what life was like then. But to think that there were that kind of thinking and those kinds of things that came out of that period of time that still to this day we look at and say like, yeah, that's it. That's wild to me.
Yeah, it's an impressive feat of ethical consideration.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I try to just think through topics on my own as much as possible, and I'm not sure where my worldview really arises from, if it can even be traced back to a single point. It's just Yeah.
Do you feel like there are like values that like like a set of core values maybe that informs the work that you do and how you live? I'm just curious, because I know you talked about a lot about like tapping into that childlike sense of wonder, but also of like just being really excited to play games, which I think is really I don't know, like important for human beings in a way. Yeah. So are there values that you kind of tapped into as you try to do the work that you do, and how do those guide you?
What can you clarify for me? Like, what do you mean by values in this context?
Sure. Yeah. So like what matters to you about the life that you live and the work that you do? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, the life that I live, I mean, just in terms of basic ethics, I just think that a lot of the insights of various traditions can be distilled down to basically saying, don't harm, do help.
Yeah.
To put it into 4 words.
That's a bumper sticker.
That's a quote from a philosopher at Yale named Shelley Kagan, who I think is pretty cool. He does work in practical ethics, and
we were ready to give that slogan to you that you came.
Yeah, you could have had it, man.
I had to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
Whether that's a value, I live my life by.
That's right. That's the ethic right there. That was ethical. Boom.
Yeah.
In terms of games, in terms of the work that I do, I mean, I think of games as being similar to mathematical objects. Things that are in some ways out there to be discovered. They're kind of patterns. They have formal properties, and so to me, I regard myself less as somebody who is inventing or building brand new things, but more somebody who is trying to just scan this abstract realm for interesting things and then report back to, our fellow denizens in the material world saying, hey, I found something interesting out there, guys.
Sure.
And I can tell that to a publisher who can say, oh yeah, you did in fact find something interesting. We're going to make X number of physical instantiations of that and sell it to people who want to play with it.
Yeah.
Hey, that's great. So in some ways, I think, much in the same way that many mathematicians feel, when they're doing mathematics, that they are searching for theorems that are kind of out there and they're sort of true or false. And it's the job of the mathematician to discover whether a particular claim holds true or not. There's something mind independent about the nature of mathematics, where you think even if, there weren't any mathematicians in the universe, the claim that there are infinitely many prime numbers, say, would be true regardless. And maybe it would be true regardless of whether there was a universe at all. And who knows about that? But my point is I regard games in a similar way. And that's kind of how I look at my work, is just trying to find interesting things out there, trying to just stub my toe and then look down and say, oh, what was that I just bumped into? And,
Yeah. So, that's an interesting perspective, because I think a lot of people who come on the show kind of think, and I don't think a lot of game designers in general too, like think they have to come up with some great idea or like some groundbreaking new concept or something. And what you're saying is like those ideas are already out there. You just have to like find them. I don't know. It feels less intimidating to frame it that way, to me anyway, than to say
take
like
some of the pressure off, maybe.
Yeah.
Great. A really fascinating person and a wonderful mathematician from the 20th century named Paul Erdős. He's a Hungarian, really eccentric guy. He used to talk about God's book. Of all the theorems, how God would have, being omniscient, God would understand all of mathematics and thus have all of the theorems with their most elegant proofs written down in this thing that he called the book,
Yeah.
And when he was an extremely prolific mathematician and published like over 1,000 papers and all this, but whenever he would land on a proof that he thought was, this is it, this is like the most elegant derivation of a particular claim, he would say, oh yeah, this is the book. This is the book proof. This is the one that I think God probably has written down somewhere. So I'm not sure if it makes things less intimidating or, how it helps or doesn't help. But that's just how I look at the task. When I really get down to the details of it, I see myself as somebody who is trying to kind of find interesting patterns and structures in this kind of abstract world where games don't just come into existence and disappear and whatnot. There's a certain sense in which even if there aren't human beings and even if there aren't game designers, like the game of Go, for example, is a kind of a pattern, a structure that is waiting to be discovered, And going back to our point about aliens, I think it might have been, I don't know if you guys have seen the AlphaGo documentary on Netflix, but highly recommended. Oh, absolutely. You gotta check it out. It's great because it goes into Go and about the beauty of the game, and it's also just a great drama of man versus machine and AIs finally being able to take on the top Go champions of the world. But I think it was Frank Lance in that documentary. Frank is the director of the NYU Game Center, but he said that, if aliens are out there, they've probably played Go. Actually, I might be misattributing that quote to Frank. I'm not totally sure, but regardless, that's kind of how I look at all of these games. Like they're out there, they're waiting to be stumbled upon, and so in a way, it's the job of the game designer just to go out and look around, and you'll find lots of stuff. And it's not like everything that's out there is equally good, and so that's where your taste and your judgment comes into play, because you need to kind of plant a flag in the right spot and say, hey, this is the interesting spot out here. Hey, everyone, take a look here, and then you get the validation of whether you were right or wrong. But
yeah, I dig it. Yeah. So you're not completely out of the woods yet on Parks, like it's not fully out yet, but it will be soon. Or do you have a follow-up project that you're working on?
Yeah, sure. Well, I also had a game through a different publisher named 25th Century Games.
Oh, cool.
Game is called Kingswood. That completed its Kickstarter campaign a few months ago. And,
right.
Congrats.
Yeah, that is cool. We're excited about that, and I'm actually doing some design work on that currently, just to do some stuff that was unlocked through stretch goals. We had some. The game is about different guilds kind of trying to win the king's favor in this kind of fantasy universe, clearing out the Kingswood of creatures. And anyways, we unlocked some more guilds and whatnot. So I'm designing those things now.
Very cool.
But yeah, I have another project with Keymaster that will be announced later this year. Can't say too much about it other than the fact that it's a cooperative game and it involves dice. And it's a game that I'm really happy about, and I've been working on it for quite a while. So anyways, looking forward to, people checking that one out once it's ready.
Yeah, very cool. And then, so the date on Parks, I know there will be some copies at Gen Con. When can people expect that?
I don't know the exact date of the retail release, but I want to say, in the month or two following Gen Con, it should be kind of rolling out, because basically the way the process will work is that there will be some advanced copies that have their shipping kind of expedited for the purpose of getting it to Gen Con. Yeah. And then the rest of the copies will be just floating slowly on some sort of barge somewhere in the ocean. I don't understand how it all works, but somehow they'll get from there to here. Yeah. And whenever they arrive, they'll be available for people to check out and play.
Yeah. Great. Cool. Well, like we said, Chris and I both really enjoyed Parks at Origins. I'm excited to get my Kickstarter copy before too long here. And, it was just great chatting with you. I really enjoy hearing your perspective about games and life, and, your curiosity and all that kind of stuff is super compelling to talk about. So, thanks, man. Thanks for doing this.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. And enjoyed talking with you guys. That was fun.
Yeah, sure. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and be sure to follow. What's the best way for people to follow your work?
Well, I'm, Henry Audubon, basically on all social media channels. Okay. I haven't been that active on social media, but it's one of my kind of intentions for myself to get a little more engaged online. Yeah. So, if people want to follow me. It's a necessary evil
these days.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I want to make good of it, and I have it not be evil, hopefully. But
Yeah, right.
yeah, I know.
Show us the way, Henry.
Yeah.
Lead
Yeah.
us. Lead us.
Yeah, if you
Oh,
figure
man.
that out, definitely let us know.
I'll come back on and tell the
Yeah.
world from this platform
Please.
if I ever crack that code. But yeah, I'm Henry Audubon everywhere on Instagram, Twitter. So yeah, follow me there, and certainly follow Keymaster Games to keep track of upcoming projects, and follow 25th Century Games. Check out Kingswood,
Definitely.
and yeah, that's it for now.
Great. Well, you can follow us on all the socials. Just search for Love Thy Nerd. When you get to Facebook, you're going to want to like our Facebook page, but then also you're going to want to ask to join the Love Thy Nerd community. So just search for Love Thy Nerd community, ask to join once we're sure that you're not a robot. I know that may be like offensive to some people, but we don't currently let robots in.
Not yet.
But not yet. One day maybe.
Just like the Star Wars Cantina.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Someday.
It's the same. It's basically the same.
Someday.
The Love Thy Nerd community is pretty similar to Star Wars Cantina. No, but if you want to nerd out about nerdy stuff with other nerds online, that's a great place to do it. And we have a whole podcast network through Love Thy Nerd. We have Free Play, which gets into all areas of nerddom and is just a super fun listen. And then we also have the Pull List, which is our comic book podcast. So those nerds on that show know a ton about comics and keep you informed, and also kind of have some deeper dive discussions about the latest happenings, big stories in the world of comics. Check out our website. We have great articles. We're constantly trying to inform you and educate you about nerd culture and why it matters and how you can engage it in ways that are thoughtful and meaningful and life-giving. So that's about it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Humans of Gaming.
Bye.